He enters without a word. No backstory, no warning. He drives. That's all you're allowed to know. In The Driver, 1978, identity is stripped down to function. The world isn't full of people, it's made of roles. The man who escapes, the man who chases, and the one who watches. Walter Hill didn't just direct a crime film. He constructed a machine cold, stripped of emotion, fueled by silence. And in its core sat a driver with no face. While the Hollywood machine obsessed over stars and spectacle, this film erased everything that could make a character feel human. No names, no past, no explanation, only motion, relentless, clinical, hypnotic, and somehow that absence became louder than any monologue ever could. It wasn't about car chases, it was about the cost of precision, the thrill of erasure, the way a man becomes myth simply by refusing to explain himself. The studios didn't get it, the audiences didn't care, but the film survived, and in time, it began to echo in the work of others. Drive, Baby Driver. The ghosts of this film live in frames that never acknowledged it. This is the story of a film that almost didn't exist, and a driver who might never have been real. Here are 20 weird facts you didn't know about The Driver, including the real-life outlaw behind the wheel, the lost reels that nearly vanished, and the one sound in the film that no one can explain. Fact 1. A real-life outlaw sat behind the wheel. The most dangerous sequences in The Driver weren't the product of choreography, they came from memory. To capture the kind of visceral speed Walter Hill demanded, the production turned to Billy Hickman, a man whose stunt career was overshadowed by a shadowy past. Before Hollywood, Hickman had carved out a reputation in the underground world of illegal racing, evading cops, and pushing stolen vehicles beyond their limits. His license may have been clean, but his history wasn't. Some of the wildest maneuvers, from tight alley drifts to brake reverse slides, weren't rehearsed. Hickman improvised them based on old instincts. More than once, Hill let the camera roll without calling cut, trusting that Hickman would find a way through chaos. Years later, a fan recognized one chase route from a real unsolved police pursuit in the mid-70 seconds. That wasn't coincidence. Hickman had reportedly reenacted one of his old getaways on camera, this time with film as his only witness. Can the thrill of authenticity ever justify putting real danger back on the streets, even for a movie? Fact 2. Nobody in this film has a name. There's no Jack, no Sarah, no Lieutenant, whoever. In The Driver, every character is reduced to a label: the driver, the detective, the player. Walter Hill wanted to eliminate identity entirely. These weren't people, they were placeholders. Archetypes locked in conflict, each one representing a role, not a life. Actors found the approach unsettling. Ryan O'Neal reportedly struggled with the lack of internal motivation, asking Hill if he could imagine a backstory or a defining moment. Hill declined. If he had a name, he said, he'd stop being useful. It wasn't just for style. Hill was experimenting with the grammar of film. By withholding names, he stripped away context, forcing the audience to observe behavior without drawing emotional lines. In hindsight, that cold detachment became part of the film's mythology. The namelessness wasn't emptiness, it was precision. Does identity deepen a story or sometimes just get in the way of pure function? Fact: the studio tried to silence the film permanently. Once The Driver was completed, 20th Century Fox panicked. Executives called the first cut incomprehensible, mute, and unmarketable. No stars, no music, no plot in the conventional sense. Just long stretches of silence punctuated by steel and rubber. The studio quietly downgraded the release. Advertising was slashed. Theaters were limited to urban areas with late-night slots. Internally, some referred to it as a controlled disappearance. Walter Hill fought back. He refused to make edits. He refused to explain the film in press interviews. In one quote, he said, "If you have to explain it, it's already dead." But then came the twist. In France, critics embraced it as a modernist masterpiece. The lack of exposition was praised as restraint, the namelessness seen as philosophical. Hill went from pariah to prophet, just not in his home country. Can a film still succeed if the people who made it never wanted you to see it? Fact 4. The first car chase was done without permission. The opening chase in The Driver doesn't feel staged because it wasn't. While most productions use closed sets and permits for city driving, Hill's crew broke convention. Several key shots during the first getaway, including the infamous alley swerve, were filmed guerrilla style, with no permits, minimal traffic control, and real bystanders unaware they were part of a movie. The stunt team blocked streets with unmarked vans and signaled the driver from rooftops. At least one bystander called the police, believing an actual crime was being filmed. By the time officers arrived, the crew was gone. One production assistant later admitted, There were scenes in that movie that were closer to committing crimes than recreating them. Hill never apologized. "You can't fake panic," he said. "You have to earn it." When filmmakers blur the line between fiction and danger, does realism justify the risk, or is it just recklessness with a camera? Fact 5. Ryan O'Neal was the third option. Ryan O'Neal may have become the face of The Driver, but he was far from the first choice. Walter Hill originally offered the role to Steve McQueen, a veteran of cinematic chases. McQueen passed instantly, fearing typecasting after Bullet. Next came Charles Bronson, whose presence might have brought a different kind of menace. But Bronson reportedly demanded rewrites that would give his character more dialogue and background. Hill refused. He wasn't interested in backstory. He wanted silence. Enter O'Neal, a leading man known for soft-spoken charm, not stoic minimalism. Critics were skeptical, but that blankness, that internal void, became the film's secret weapon. O'Neal didn't fill the role. He emptied himself into it. Hill later said, "He was like a shadow with a pulse, exactly what we needed." Can the wrong actor, in the wrong genre, become perfect when everything else is stripped away? Fact 6. America rejected it. France declared it a masterpiece. When The Driver premiered in the US, it barely made a sound, but across the Atlantic it exploded. French critics hailed it as a landmark of modern cinema. Magazines like Cahiers du Cinéma praised its minimalism, calling it a meditation on motion and identity. The film's quiet intensity resonated deeply with a post-New Wave audience that craved atmosphere over explanation. In Paris, it screened alongside Le Samouraï and Breathless as part of a retrospective on antiheroes. Jean-Pierre Melville's fans saw in Hill a spiritual descendant. Some even suggested The Driver wasn't a man at all, but a stand-in for fate itself, moving through a decaying city with no goal but completion. Meanwhile, in the US, it faded into obscurity. Critics dismissed it as cold. Viewers walked out. But Hill's vision had already found a second home. Does greatness depend on timing or on the eyes that choose to see it? Fact 7. A soundtrack was written then buried. At one point, The Driver was dangerously close to sounding like every other thriller of its time. Midway through post-production, studio executives demanded a traditional score. A composer was hired. Tracks were recorded, pulsating synth, chase cues, atmospheric tension. The plan was to inject energy into the film's long silences. Walter Hill disagreed violently. To him, silence was the soundscape, the roar of tires, the hum of fluorescent lights, the quiet between glares. These weren't gaps, they were choices. Hill reportedly told the composer, "If you can hear the music, you've missed the point." Test screenings with the added soundtrack confirmed Hill's instinct. Audiences found the version with music oddly conventional. The silence made them uneasy. The music made them feel safe. The studio relented. The composer was quietly removed from credits. The tapes were shelved, never released. What remains is a film where the loudest moments are often the quietest. Does adding sound fill in emotion or erase the discomfort that gives a film its edge? Fact 8. The police procedures were real and legally dubious. Unlike most Hollywood thrillers, The Driver didn't glamorize cops. It dissected their methods with surgical coldness. Hill consulted with real LAPD officers to craft interrogation scenes that felt authentic. Many of the techniques used in the film, verbal pressure, isolation, manipulation, without charges, were pulled directly from real precinct tactics. The infamous lineup scene, where suspects are treated more like bait than witnesses, mirrored real practices that would soon come under legal scrutiny. One retired officer later noted that several methods in the film were on the edge of what courts were beginning to outlaw. It wasn't hyperbole. It was a snapshot of law enforcement at a moment of transition where power was being challenged, but not yet checked. And perhaps that's what unsettled audiences most. Not the silence, but the accuracy. When a film reflects the truth too closely, does it start to feel more like exposure than fiction? Fact 9. Isabelle Adjani said no to becoming a ghost. The female lead in The Driver is a whisper present, but distant. That wasn't always the plan. The role was first offered to French actress Isabelle Adjani, who had just stunned critics with her haunting performance in The Story of Adele H. Hill, believed her quiet intensity would elevate the minimalist script. Adjani was intrigued, but after reading the pages and meeting with Hill, she walked away. Her reason? "The woman has no arc," she observes, "but she never moves." In a later interview, she called the character a ghost standing beside a shadow. Eventually, the role went to Roni Blackley, whose performance matched Hill's intention: neutral, unreadable, and silent. it fit. But it also deepened the mystery of what wasn't said, especially from the film's only central woman. Can restraint be powerful, or does emotional vacancy just leave an empty frame? Fact: 10 police academies quietly studied this film. What if a film about a nameless criminal became instructional material for real law enforcement? In the early 1980 seconds, a few California police academies reportedly began showing scenes from The Driver during pursuit training sessions. Not for storytelling, for tactics. The film's meticulous driving sequences, particularly the tight urban escapes, were analyzed for their precision and spatial awareness. The instructors made clear they weren't endorsing the character, but they couldn't ignore the technique. One officer allegedly told cadets, "This guy doesn't run, he calculates." Officially, the use of the film was never documented. Once news of the screenings leaked, departments quietly dropped the footage. Using a getaway driver as an educational model didn't sit well with administrators, but it happened. And somewhere, a real cop learned how to read a city grid by watching The Driver. When a film becomes a training tool, has it crossed the line between art and manual? Fact 11: The driver never blinks. Not once. There's something uncanny about him, but you can't explain why. Ryan O'Neal's portrayal of the driver is marked by more than silence. Watch closely, and you'll notice he doesn't blink. Not during conversations, not under pressure, not even when headlights flash straight into his eyes. This wasn't an accident. Walter Hill directed O'Neal to maintain complete stillness, physical, emotional, ocular. The absence of blinking became symbolic. The character doesn't process the world like others. He observes, absorbs, but never reacts. Cinematographers adjusted lighting and lensing to accommodate this unnatural intensity. Several takes were reshot simply because O'Neal's eyelids moved too much. In the final cut, the driver barely seems alive, and yet he's the stillest force in every frame. Does emotional absence heighten tension or strip away humanity altogether? Fact 12. No character changes at all. In most stories, someone evolves, learns, breaks. The driver offers no such arc. The driver is stoic from beginning to end. The detective remains aggressive and obsessed. The player never reveals motivation. They rotate around each other like fixed stars, never colliding, never altering. Walter Hill designed the narrative that way. He saw transformation as unnecessary. These characters weren't meant to grow, they were meant to exist, fulfill function, and exit. Some critics saw this as bleak, others called it refreshing. The refusal to deliver moral growth was itself a commentary on genre expectations. By the film's close, nothing is resolved. No lessons are learned, just quiet continuation. Does a story need change to mean something, or can stillness carry its own kind of weight? Fact 13. There's one joke in the entire film, and it doesn't land. Across nearly 90 minutes of ice-cold tension, there is one line, one that dares to reach for humor. During a conversation between the detective and his team, frustration boils over. One cop mutters, "Dead serious. Maybe we should hire a psychic." No punchline, no chuckle. Just a flat suggestion dropped into the sterile silence of the investigation. Hill didn't write that line. It came from an actor improvising out of fatigue, but Hill left it in not because it was funny, but because it wasn't. The absurdity wasn't the joke. The lack of reaction was. Critics later debated its purpose. Some thought it was a rare moment of levity. Others saw it as a microcosm of the film's worldview where emotion is void and even absurdity fades into white noise. It's the kind of moment you miss if you blink, which, of course, the driver never does. Can a joke still work when no one's laughing, and does discomfort become the real punchline? Fact 14. The most dangerous shot was captured without a second take. One sequence in The Driver stands out not for its speed, but for its nerve. The moment. A high-speed slide through a narrow alleyway, clearing 2 dumpsters by inches. It happens fast, maybe 3 seconds of screen time, but the context behind it is staggering. That shot was done once. No rehearsals, no stunt doubles. Just a rented car, a stuntman with nerves of steel, and a city block they weren't supposed to be filming on. The alley had been discovered the night before. Hill approved it on instinct. The crew arrived before dawn, blocked traffic unofficially, and rolled camera. The driver hit his mark so precisely that the car's side mirror clipped one of the dumpsters, a real impact you can spot if you freeze the frame. They never shot it again. They didn't need to. When a single take captures something that shouldn't be possible, is it bravery or a calculated risk disguised as genius? Fact 15. The film claims to have no score, but listen closer. At first glance, The Driver feels sonically barren. No musical themes, no orchestral swells, just engine growls and shoes on pavement. But that's not the whole truth. Buried deep in the film's audio mix is a sustained, low-frequency tone almost imperceptible that plays during the parking garage sequence. It's not tied to any visible source. It doesn't match the car's hum or city ambience. The sound editor later confirmed it was an artificial element added in post, a pressure frequency, designed to induce unease without conscious recognition. It pulses for just under 20 seconds, then disappears. Some viewers reported feeling tense or dizzy during that scene without knowing why. Others never noticed it at all. Walter Hill never commented on the tone. But those who've studied the film's sound design insist it was deliberate, a subliminal thread stitched into an already minimal world. If you feel something without realizing why, is that manipulation or mastery? Fact 16. The iconic car was never meant to be used. The driver's car, unremarkable, boxy, eerily silent, became an icon of minimalist cool. But it wasn't supposed to be in the movie at all. Production originally planned to use a Dodge Charger, loud, aggressive, cinematic. But a mechanical failure, a busted transmission 2 days before shooting, forced the crew into emergency mode. The only available replacement? A beige 1974 Chevrolet Impala pulled from a rental fleet. It was plain, too plain. But that's exactly why Walter Hill chose it. The Impala didn't draw attention. It blended into the background. It didn't scream power, it whispered anonymity. What started as a compromise became a statement. The car didn't just fit the driver, it was the driver. Functional, quiet, easily forgotten until it moved. Decades later, car enthusiasts still debate how something so ordinary became unforgettable. Can anonymity become a form of power when invisibility is what makes you unstoppable? Fact 17. A real court case referenced this movie as inspiration. In a bizarre twist, the driver once made an unexpected appearance in a criminal courtroom. In 1983, a man charged with multiple armed robberies cited the film as part of his defense. He told the court he had studied the movie repeatedly, using it to practice calm under pressure and design his escape routes. Prosecutors presented a worn-out VHS copy of The Driver, labeled with handwritten note. Though the judge dismissed the film as a meaningful influence, its presence became part of the trial transcript. Law enforcement expressed concern that the movie had been used like a training manual. The media briefly picked up the story, framing it as another example of films gone too far. But the public mostly ignored it. The movie remained in the shadows, just like the man who idolized its anti-hero. When art imitates life and life imitates back, where do we draw the line of responsibility? Fact 18. No alternate endings were ever written. In an industry obsessed with test screenings and safety nets, The Driver had only one ending, and Hill made sure it stayed that way. From the first draft to the final cut, the film closes the same way. Silence, stillness, ambiguity. No arrests, no resolution, just a look, and then absence. Studio execs pushed for options. Could the driver die? Could the player betray him? Hill refused. He said the film was about control, and endings that explained too much surrender that control. His editor confirmed that not a single alternate ending was filmed, storyboarded, or even discussed. There was no what if, she said. Only the one path forward, and it vanished when you tried to follow it. Today, the ending remains one of the most divisive elements in the film's legacy. Is ambiguity a flaw, or the only honest way to leave a myth intact? Fact 19. The final scene was filmed in total silence. No words, no directions, not even background noise. That's how the final scene of The Driver was shot. Walter Hill wanted more than visual stillness. He wanted presence to disappear. For the last shot, he ordered complete on-set silence. No one spoke. Lights were adjusted in advance. Movements were coordinated with hand signals. O'Neill and Blackley were given no new instructions. They just existed. What unfolded wasn't just an ending, it was a vanishing act. The crew reportedly felt the weight of the quiet more than any line of dialogue. It felt like we were witnessing the closing of something that had never fully opened, one lighting tech recalled. That atmosphere seeped into the film. The final shot doesn't explain. It dissolves. The driver doesn't drive away. He recedes. Years later, that moment is still debated. What did it mean? Was it defeat? Liberation? Nothing at all? Can the loudest ending be one where nothing is said and everything disappears? Fact 20. Ryan O'Neill never got to know his character. Ryan O'Neill spent the entire production playing someone he couldn't name, couldn't explain, and ultimately couldn't understand. From the start, Walter Hill denied him access to character notes. No backstory, no inner monologue. When O'Neill asked why the driver did what he did, Hill responded, "Because he's the driver. That's all you need." The lack of direction frustrated O'Neill. But something strange happened. Over time, the frustration became the performance, the stillness, the unreadable glare, the refusal to connect. It wasn't an act, it was confusion, captured. In an interview years later, O'Neill admitted, "I kept waiting for a reveal for a page that explained him. It never came, so I just stopped waiting." Maybe that was the point. Maybe not knowing is the only honest way to portray a man like that. Is total emptiness a failure of performance or its highest form? Bonus fact: the film almost vanished without a sound. It nearly disappeared not in the story, but in real life. In 1989, over a decade after The Driver was released, 20th Century Fox began clearing out old film archives. Due to a clerical error, several reels were marked for disposal under the label "scrap, damaged, or unused." Among them was a box that contained the original negatives of The Driver. No one noticed until an intern flagged the visual slate markings while conducting a routine shelf check. The reels were hours away from destruction. No backups existed. No duplicates had been confirmed. The discovery prompted a quiet internal panic. A memo was circulated across the studio calling it a near loss of legacy property. Publicly, nothing was said, but those involved later admitted the film had come closer to permanent erasure than anyone knew. It's ironic. A movie about disappearing, about namelessness, and vanishing without consequence nearly suffered the same fate, filed away, misunderstood, and almost incinerated by mistake. What saved it wasn't money or nostalgia. It was someone noticing a number that didn't match. How many other stories have already been lost, not through censorship, but through silence? The Driver was never meant to be understood, only followed, quietly, until he was gone. Some facts in this film were accidents. Others were intentions no one was supposed to see. But one question remains: was The Driver a man? Or just the echo of a story designed to vanish the moment you tried to understand it? Tell us in the comments what theory you believe and which forgotten film you want us to uncover next.